I must confess, I find myself captivated.
Thank you, Your Grace. Your candor is appreciated.
Clara Bellamy realized she had become the evening's entertainment when she found her name card next to Duke Nathaniel Prescott. For several seconds, she just stood behind the chair and looked at the small cream card, hoping it might rearrange itself if given enough time. It did not. Her name stayed exactly where someone had placed it, directly to the right of the man most. People in the room had spent the afternoon discussing in hushed tones. Nathaniel Prescott was 41, immensely wealthy, unmarried, and notorious for lacking both patience and politeness that society usually expected from men of his rank. He once left a dinner before dessert because the host insulted a footman, ended a political friendship after discovering the man had lied to his tenants, and was rumored to have reduced an ambitious viscountess to tears by asking why she had changed her opinion 3 times in a single conversation. Whether those stories were entirely true hardly mattered. London had decided Duke Prescott was frightening, and everyone behaved accordingly. Across the dining room, Clara saw Lady Rosamond Vale glance toward her. Rosamond quickly lowered her eyes, but not before Clara noticed the smile she exchanged with the 2 young women beside her. That explained everything. Earlier that afternoon, Rosamond and her friends had been joking about who would be unlucky enough to sit beside Prescott. Clara had heard enough to understand that none of them wanted the position. Apparently, someone decided the poor widow serving as Lady Agnes Harcourt's companion would make a more entertaining sacrifice. Lady Agnes leaned toward Clara. That was not where you were seated this morning, no. Would you like me to speak to our hostess? Clara considered it. Then she saw Rosamond watching again. No, she said quietly. That would only make them happier. Saturday. Nathaniel Prescott arrived a moment later. He was taller than Clara expected, dressed in a perfectly cut black evening coat and dark waistcoat. His expression was composed enough to make it impossible to know whether anything in the room interested him. He glanced at Clara's name card, then at Clara herself before taking his seat. You appear disappointed, Mrs. Bellamy. His voice was low rather than intimidating. Clara unfolded her napkin. Not disappointed, Your Grace. Merely aware that several people are waiting for you to frighten me. Nathaniel's hand paused beside his wineglass. Then his gaze traveled leisurely across the table. Rosamond immediately became fascinated by her plate. And are you frightened? He asked. Not yet. Clara looked at him. I thought I should allow you the opportunity first. For a moment, Nathaniel said nothing. Then one corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was enough to make Clara suspect half the stories about him had been exaggerated by people unaccustomed to being answered honestly. Dinner began. At first, Nathaniel asked ordinary questions. How long had Clara known Lady Agnes? Did she enjoy Harrington Hall? Was she staying for the entire house party? Clara answered without trying to make each response impressive. When he asked what she thought of the gathering, she glanced at the chandeliers and the mountains of flowers. The 6 different wineglasses beside every plate, and the servants moving silently behind 30 guests. It seems exhausting to spend this much money proving that no one here needs money. Nathaniel looked at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was brief and quiet, but several people nearby turned in surprise. You realize, he said, that most people invited to houses like this spend considerable effort pretending not to notice the expense. Perhaps that is why so much expense is required. His eyes sharpened with interest. The conversation moved elsewhere around them. A baronet began complaining about a widowed cousin who had been forced to sell part of her jewelry after her husband's death. According to him, the woman had made matters worse by refusing to move in with relatives. She has always been proud, he said. Rosamond smiled. Some widows mistake independence for dignity. Clara felt the words before she saw several glances move toward her. She continued eating. Nathaniel noticed. Do you agree, Mrs. Bellamy? The table grew slightly quieter. Clara knew exactly what was being asked of her. Agree, and she would help them laugh at women in circumstances very close to her own. Disagree too strongly and she'd be seen as the difficult widow who couldn't take a joke. She put down her fork. I think independence is often called pride by those who'd prefer someone to rely on them. Silence followed. Nathaniel didn't break it. He just raised his wineglass. A useful distinction. Rosamond's expression tightened. A few minutes later, Clara saw her pass something under the table to the woman beside her. A gold guinea. Nathaniel saw it too. His gaze moved from the coin to Clara, then to the seating cards. Understanding dawned on his face. What? Clara asked quietly. I believe I've discovered why you're sitting beside me. I figured it out a bit earlier. And you stayed. I dislike rewarding bad manners. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood. Conversation around the table halted. The hostess went pale. Prescott, is something wrong? The seating seems to have an error. No, Your Grace, I'm certain. Nathaniel reached for several place cards. Rosamond's face changed. He calmly swapped the positions of Rosamond and her two friends with three elderly guests seated much farther from the center of the table. Then handed the cards to the steward. There. No one moved. Rosamond stared at him. Your Grace, surely Mrs. Bellamy was also seated incorrectly. Nathaniel glanced toward Clara. No. His answer was perfectly calm. Mrs. Bellamy is exactly where I wish her to be. The rest of dinner passed under a layer of strained civility. Clara could feel the story changing around her in real time. The poor widow who had been placed beside Prescott as a joke was suddenly the woman the Duke had chosen to keep beside him. And society was already preparing to make that transformation far more romantic than it deserved. After dinner, Clara found Nathaniel alone near the doors of the library. You should not have done that. He turned. Of all the things he had apparently expected her to say, that was not one of them. They were humiliating you. So you humiliated them. I stopped them. No, Your Grace. Clara held his gaze. You decided for me how I should be defended. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly. You preferred that I do nothing? I would have preferred that you ask. They were laughing at you. Yes. And I was surviving it perfectly well. Nathaniel stared at her. Clara softened her voice but not the meaning. You saw something cruel and assumed your anger gave you the right to choose my response. No one spoke to Duke Nathaniel Prescott that way. At least not twice. Clara gave a small curtsy and walked away before he could answer. Nathaniel remained beside the library door, watching her disappear into the drawing room. 30 minutes earlier, he had rearranged an entire table because he believed Clara Bellamy deserved better than the place others had chosen for her. Only now did he understand the part that unsettled him most. He had never once asked where she wanted to sit. By breakfast the following morning, Clara Bellamy had gained a reputation she never sought. The story had already circulated through Harrington Hall in several versions. In one, Duke Prescott had rearranged the table because Lady Rosamond insulted him by meddling with his seating. In another, he was so taken with Clara that he wouldn't let her move. The most popular version suggested that Clara had somehow managed, in the course of a single dinner, to achieve what dozens of unmarried women had failed to do for years. She had caught Nathaniel Prescott's interest. No one seemed particularly concerned about whether. When she entered the breakfast room with Lady Agnes, conversations hushed around them, then resumed with exaggerated nonchalance. Clara recognized the pattern immediately. She had been a widow long enough to know that society rarely stopped talking about a woman just because she entered the room. It simply became more creative in pretending not to. Lady Agnes lowered herself into a chair and sighed. I warned you that refusing to change seats would encourage them. You advised me to stay put. I am old. Contradiction is one of the few pleasures left to me. Clara almost smiled. Across the room, Lady Rosamond was speaking to two women who had been seated beside Nathaniel after his rearrangement. Whatever embarrassment Rosamond had suffered the night before had turned into amusement by morning. When Clara approached the sideboard, Rosamond turned. Mrs. Bellamy. I hope you slept well after such an eventful evening. Very well, thank you. I had no idea Prescott could be so attentive. Clara selected a piece of toast. Neither did I. Rosamond smiled. Perhaps you have discovered a method the rest of us overlooked. Clara looked at her. If I had, Lady Rosamond, I assure you I would not waste it on dining arrangements. A laugh escaped from someone nearby before being quickly disguised as a cough. Rosamond's smile tightened. Clara returned to Lady Agnes without another word. Nathaniel was not in the breakfast room. She told herself she was relieved. An hour later, she found him waiting beside the rose garden. Harrington Hall's gardens had been designed for leisurely walks and discreet conversations, but Clara suspected Nathaniel had chosen the most visible path deliberately. He did not want anyone to suggest he had cornered her somewhere private. That consideration surprised her. "Mrs. Bellamy, Your Grace." He fell into step beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Nathaniel said, "I owe you an apology." Clara looked at him. There was no irritation in his expression this time. "I have been thinking about what you said. That sounds dangerous. It has been deeply inconvenient." Despite herself, Clara smiled. Nathaniel continued, "I saw cruelty last night and assumed that because I had the ability to stop it, I also had the right to decide how it should be stopped." Clara's expression softened slightly. "That is closer to an apology." Nathaniel glanced at her. "I am sorry." This time there was no defense attached to it. Clara nodded. "Thank you." They walked farther along the gravel path. "What should I have done?" he asked. Clara considered the question before answering. "You could have asked whether I wished to move. And if you had said no, then you could have allowed me to remain where I was." While they laughed. "I have survived worse than laughter." Nathaniel looked ahead. "That may be the problem." "What is?" "I am accustomed to solving things before I have to watch someone endure." Clara studied him. "And has that always worked?" "No." The honesty of the answer interested her more than any polished explanation would have. After that morning, their conversations became more frequent. Nathaniel no longer sought her out with the intensity of a man determined to win an argument. Instead, he appeared beside Lady Agnes during tea, joined a walk when invited, or sat near Clara in the drawing room and asked what she was reading. Clara discovered that beneath his reputation was a man with little patience for performance but a surprising amount for ideas. He disliked gossip, disliked flattery even more, and seemed genuinely puzzled whenever someone agreed with him too quickly. One afternoon, while Lady Agnes slept near the fire, Nathaniel asked, "What did you think of me before dinner?" Clara did not look up from her book. "That you were probably unbearable. And now?" She turned a page. "I have considerably more evidence." Nathaniel laughed. "It became too easy perhaps." The problem arrived 3 days later when Lady Agnes informed Clara that she would be moving permanently to Bath at the end of the season to live with her eldest daughter. "You will have excellent references," Lady Agnes said. "Any respectable household would be fortunate to have you." Clara smiled, but Nathaniel seated nearby noticed the brief tension in her face. Later he found her alone in the conservatory. "Lady Agnes is leaving?" "Yes." "And your position ends with hers?" "Yes." Nathaniel did what he had always done when confronted with a practical difficulty. "I can find you another position." Clara turned slowly. Nathaniel stopped. He recognized the expression. "There," she said. He exhaled. "I did it again." "You did. I was trying to help." "I know. That does not improve it." "Not considerably." He leaned against the edge of a stone planter. "What were you planning to do?" Clara looked through the glass toward the gardens. "I have some savings. I may take a small lodging in Bath or Winchester and manage correspondence for several older women who no longer wish to employ full-time companions. Lady Agnes believes she can introduce me to 2. "You have already arranged this?" "I have begun." Nathaniel was silent. Clara looked at him. "You heard that my situation was uncertain and immediately decided the answer should come from you. I am beginning to understand why you find me exhausting." "Progress again." He smiled, but this time he did not offer anything else. Unfortunately, society was less capable of restraint. By the following week, a London gossip sheet reached Harrington Hall with a short paragraph about the house party. It described Clara as the impoverished widow who seems to have won over the formidable Duke of Prescott. by the unusual strategy of pretending not to want him. Clara read the sentence once. Then again. Lady Agnes was furious. Nathaniel was worse. He wanted the publisher's name, the writer's name, and apparently the address of everyone who had ever repeated the story. Clara stopped him before he reached the door. No. Nathaniel turned. They have insulted you. Yes. I can end this. That is exactly what frightens me. He stared at her. If Duke Prescott publicly announces that I am respectable, what do you imagine everyone will conclude? That I believe you are? No. They will conclude that I require your approval to be respectable. Nathaniel's anger did not disappear, but he said nothing. 2 days later, Clara received a letter. A household in Somerset that had been considering hiring her to manage correspondence for an elderly widow was withdrawing the offer. The explanation was careful, apologetic, and unmistakable. They did not wish to employ a woman surrounded by romantic scandal. Clara folded the letter and placed it on the table. Nathaniel, standing opposite her, read enough of her expression to understand. His attention had made her visible. Now that visibility was beginning to cost her the very independence she had been trying to build. And for the first time, Nathaniel realized that protecting Clara might require something far more challenging than wielding his influence. It might mean not using it at all. Nathaniel's first impulse was to fight. He wanted to write to the household in Somerset, demand the name of whoever had rejected Clara, and make it absolutely clear that no respectable family would lose his favor just because a widow had been seen speaking to him at dinner. He also wanted the gossip sheet corrected, the editor confronted, and Lady Rosamond forced to deny every insinuation she had helped fuel in the story. Clara stopped him before he did any of it. They were standing in Lady Agnes's private sitting room, the rejection letter still folded on the table between them. You cannot do that. Nathaniel looked at her as though she had objected to putting out a fire. They have cost you work. Yes. And you expect me to stand aside? I expect you to understand what happens if you do not. His expression hardened. Clara picked up the letter. If you write to them, they will not hire me because they trust my character. They will hire me because Duke Prescott has instructed them to. I would not instruct them. You would not have to. Nathaniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. Clara continued more quietly. You can survive being called difficult, arrogant, scandalous, or improper because you are a duke. Those words may inconvenience you, but they do not decide whether you can pay your rent next month. The anger in his face faded. I survive because people believe I am respectable, she said. If my respectability becomes something you publicly guarantee, then it belongs to you as surely as if you purchased it. Nathaniel looked down at the letter. What do you want me to do? Clara paused. It was the first time he had asked before deciding. Nothing. He clearly disliked the answer. But he nodded. 2 mornings later, Clara left Harrington Hall with Lady Agnes. Nathaniel did not arrange another carriage, did not send a servant to accompany her, and did not appear at the last moment with some grand solution disguised as courtesy. He stood on the front steps, wished Lady Agnes a pleasant journey, and told Clara only that he hoped she would write if she wished to. She noticed the last 3 words, if she wished to. Clara wrote 3 weeks later. The letter was not romantic. She told him Lady Agnes had settled well in Bath, that one of the women she hoped to work for had terrible handwriting, and that she had discovered managing correspondence for 3 households at once was less elegant than it sounded. Nathaniel answered by informing her that at least no one could accuse terrible handwriting of trying to seduce him. Clara laughed aloud when she read it. Their letters continued. They argued about books, estate schools, whether people became more honest as they grew older or merely less energetic about pretending, and whether Nathaniel's reputation for frightening drawing rooms had been earned or carefully cultivated. During that time, Nathaniel attended several dinners without Clara. It changed how he viewed them. He noticed how quickly conversations shifted when someone less wealthy entered the room. He observed how widows were often seen as either tragic or available, with little room in between. He saw how titled women could act cruelly and still be called spirited, while someone like Clara could lose her job just because people found her interesting enough to gossip about. At one dinner, Lady Rosamond finally challenged him. Surely, she said, you can't seriously prefer Mrs. Bellamy to women who actually belong in your world. Nathaniel put down his glass. I've spent 41 years in my world. Rosamond smiled, expecting agreement, but Nathaniel continued. I'm beginning to suspect that may be the problem. He said nothing more. For once, he didn't defend Clara by linking his name to hers. He simply refused to engage in the disdain that had made her vulnerable to begin with. Nearly 2 months passed before he visited her. Clara had rented 2 modest rooms in Bath and now managed correspondence. And accounts for 3 elderly women who preferred independence over living permanently with married children. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Nathaniel asked if he could visit. Clara agreed. When he arrived, he found her surrounded by letters, ink, and a stack of household bills. You look disappointed, she said. I had imagined something more romantic. This is what independence looks like before tea, he smiled. Their courtship, if it could be called that, began there. Nathaniel did not send jewelry. He brought books because Clara had mentioned wanting to read them, and even then he learned to ask before leaving anything expensive behind. He listened when she spoke about work rather than treating it as an unfortunate phase before marriage. Eventually, however, Clara asked the question neither had avoided entirely. If this became something more, what would happen to all of this? Nathaniel glanced toward the desk. You mean your work? Yes. You could continue. Clara's face changed slightly. Nathaniel heard his own words and immediately understood. If I permitted it, he added bitterly. I did not say that. You did not have to. He leaned back. Clara looked down at her hands. You see the difficulty? I do. If I married you, everyone would say my life became extraordinary because you chose me. Nathaniel frowned. Does that matter? To you, perhaps not. She looked at him. Men like you are remembered for whom they chose. Women like me are often remembered only because we were chosen. Nathaniel had no answer that would not prove her point. A month later, both were invited to another dinner at Harrington Hall. Clara almost declined. Then she decided she was tired of allowing the people who had once laughed at her to determine which rooms she entered. The evening was quieter than the first, but everyone remembered. When dinner was announced, the hostess stood awkwardly beside the seating plan. Clara noticed Nathaniel's name near the center of the table, and Lady Rosamond was there too. The hostess turned to Nathaniel. Your Grace, I was unsure where Mrs. Bellamy might prefer. The room seemed to pause. Everyone expected him to say beside. Nathaniel looked at Clara instead. Mrs. Bellamy, he asked, where would you like to sit? Clara stared at him. There was no challenge in his face. No rescue. Only a question. She glanced over the table and chose a seat between Lady Agnes and an elderly widow who funded a village school. There, I think. Nathaniel nodded. Very good. He took his own place several chairs away. Clara sat down. For the first time since the night she had been placed beside him as a joke, no one else had decided where she belonged. And as she looked across the table at Nathaniel, she understood that this was the first thing he had ever given her. That truly felt like love. After the dinner at Harrington Hall, something between Clara and Nathaniel became easier. Not simpler exactly. Clara still had work that mattered to her. Nathaniel still had a lifetime of habits built around command. And neither of them pretended affection could erase the difference between a duke and a widow, who had spent years learning how easily security could disappear. But Nathaniel had finally stopped trying to prove that he could make Clara's life better. He began asking instead. When he wished to visit Bath, he wrote first. When he wanted her opinion on a school being planned on one of his estates, he didn't send architects expecting gratitude, he sent the proposal and asked what she thought was missing. When Clara disagreed with him, Nathaniel no longer saw disagreement as an obstacle. Sometimes he even seemed to enjoy it. You rejected 3 pages of my proposal, he complained one afternoon as they walked by the river. 4. I was trying to be generous. You were trying to build a school without asking a single teacher how children actually use one. Nathaniel sighed. I miss the days when people just told me everything I suggested was excellent. No, you don't. He looked at her. No. I really don't. Clara smiled. By then, what lay between them had become too important to pretend it was just friendship. Nathaniel knew it, Clara knew it, Lady Agnes certainly knew it and had stopped even making a ceremonial effort to leave them alone discreetly. Still, Clara hesitated. One winter evening, Nathaniel found her finishing correspondence by the fire. "If I married you," she said without looking up, "what would happen to my work?" Nathaniel almost answered immediately. "You could continue if you wished." The sentence reached his mouth before he realized what was wrong with it. He stopped. Clara looked up. Nathaniel gave a rueful smile. "That's not mine to decide." She said nothing. So he asked the question he should have understood months earlier. "What would marriage to me have to look like for you not to disappear inside it?" Clara slowly put down her pen. She told him. She wanted to keep managing correspondence for the women who relied on her. She wanted her own earnings to stay under her control. She didn't want every disagreement between them settled by his rank or his money. Or his ability to make uncomfortable problems disappear before she could decide what she. Most importantly, she said, "If I tell you no, I need you to believe I mean no. Not that I'm being proud, frightened, or difficult. And not that I secretly want you to persuade me." Nathaniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he simply said, "All right." Clara studied him suspiciously. "That's all? What were you expecting? A negotiation? I've finally learned not to bargain for things that should be freely given." He didn't propose that night. Clara noticed that too. Several weeks later, Lady Agnes hosted a small dinner in Bath. There were no fashionable crowds, no seating games, and no women waiting to see if Clara would embarrass herself. Only 12 people attended. When Clara entered the dining room, she saw one empty chair beside Nathaniel. He didn't touch it. He didn't look toward the hostess. He simply waited. Clara paused. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Where would you like to sit?" She looked around the table. Then she walked directly toward him and pulled out the empty chair herself. Nathaniel's expression softened. "Are you certain?" "Clara Saturday. This time I chose the seat." For the rest of dinner, he said nothing about those words. Only afterward, when the other guests had moved into the drawing room, did Nathaniel ask Clara to stay for a moment. There was no audience, no grand declaration, no family ring displayed as if its value should make the answer easier. Nathaniel simply stood before her. "I've spent most of my life assuming that if I could offer the better choice, people would naturally want it." Clara smiled faintly. "That does sound like you. I was wrong." He took her hand but didn't tighten his fingers around it. "I don't want to decide where you belong, Clara." His voice lowered. "I only want to know if there's a place beside you that you would choose to give." For several seconds, Clara said nothing. Nathaniel waited. Then she turned her hand in his. "Yes." Years later, at a crowded dinner in Prescott House, an elderly widow arrived late and found no place had been prepared for her. The young hostess panicked, and several guests began quietly suggesting where the woman could be fitted without disturbing the arrangement. Nathaniel opened his mouth, then stopped. Clara noticed. She walked toward the widow and asked, "Where would you like to sit?" The woman blinked in surprise before choosing a chair near the fire. Clara had it moved immediately. Across the room, Nathaniel met his wife's eyes. On the night they first met, he had believed kindness meant giving Clara a better place than the one others had chosen for her. It had taken him much longer to understand the truth. Love was not deciding where someone belonged. It was ensuring they stayed free to choose and being thankful when, after everything, they chose a place beside you.